Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Michael Siggins, and I'm the founder of the Channel Pro Network. So glad you could spend some time with us here today. Our network includes websites, events, and a monthly magazine for managed service providers and technology integrators. Our mission here really is a very simple one. It's to provide you with the insights and resources that you need to be more successful at your job. Today's webinar is a perfect example of the kind of resources that can help your business. Our topic today is how to package, price, and sell cybersecurity solutions. We've got a very special guest lined up for today. Our presenter today is Jennifer Bleam. She is author, speaker, sales trainer, podcast interviewer extraordinaire at MSP Sales Revolution. Before I turn things over to her, though, a few quick housekeeping items. Please get involved. We always encourage your feedback and questions because it makes for a better experience today. If you've got any questions for us, please use the Q&A area down at the bottom of the screen. We will cover questions and answers at the end of the presentation today. Tomorrow, we're going to follow up with more information and a link to the recording. All right, now I'm going to turn things over to our presenter. Jennifer Bleam is a wife, mother of 3 boys, and a mentor for MSPs looking to dominate the marketplace and build the company of their dreams. She's been featured in countless trade publications, including Channel Pro, and podcasts, and has been a guest speaker and trainer on stages around the world, including North America, Australia, and Europe. To date, Jennifer has coached nearly 2,000 MSPs on effective sales and marketing to small and medium businesses, and we're going to add a few hundred to that list today. So Jennifer, welcome. Good to see you. Please take it away.
Awesome. Good to see you too. So I am very excited about this topic. If you have followed me for any length of time, you know that I love talking about cybersecurity and I love talking specifically about sales. So we are going to focus really hard on that particular piece of the puzzle today. And I want to introduce myself first because you may not be familiar with me, but you may know some of my work. So who is Jennifer Bleam? Well, about a year ago in March, I published a book called Simplified Cybersecurity Sales for MSPs. I did this because a number of industry leaders recommended that I do that. They said, you've got to publish a book. And no one was more surprised than me when it hit the bestseller list. And so love it. I love adding value wherever I can to the MSP world. And I've got close to 70 positive reviews on Amazon. And we're going to be unpacking some of the things that are taught inside of the book, but quite a few of the concepts that I'm teaching today aren't in the book. So these are like almost like bonus chapters. The only negatives that I hear about my book is that they wish it was longer. They wish I gave more content, even though the content that's in there is great. And then I did get one person who was awfully grumpy because he picked it up expecting it to be a dull, dry, boring sales book. And he picked it up during his kids', I think it was a lacrosse game or soccer game. And he missed the entire game because he couldn't put the book down. And that says something, because if you've ever read a sales book, usually they are a little dry and dull and boring. So what makes me qualified to talk about sales? Well, I love sales. I have studied sales for several decades, read hundreds of books on sales. And then as far as training, I did the Chartech Sales Lab, the multi-day, like 4-day intensive where Alex Rogers makes you cry if you don't pass. I may or may not have hidden in the bathroom at one point in time because he's super intimidating. That was before I really had my sales chops. And then I was a Sandler sales person as a trainee for a couple of years. I was a Pikaite for a few years as well when I was helping my husband with sales and marketing with his MSP. I've studied under the gap selling person. His name is Keenan. You know, he's super cool because he only has one name. He goes by Keenan. And so I take all of these different ideas, both from outside of our industry and inside of our industry, and I apply them to cybersecurity. Because one thing that I'm not particularly good at is taking like a great book on marketing that's written for like a digital marketer and applying that to MSP sales and my business. And so I wanted to be able to do that for you. And so it was a lot of work, but I loved it and it's super effective. And you're going to see a little piece of that today. By the way, the book is on Amazon for $5 and it will be on Audible very, very soon. The files are in my inbox. So if you love Audible, you'll be able to listen to it in about 90 minutes or less. Longer than that if you speed it up like I typically do when I listen to Audible. So what I'm going to cover today, the first thing we're going to talk about is why have a sales process at all? Why have it? Why is it important? Why can't I just go in and use my gut feel or my instincts? What's the purpose of having a process? And then secondly, what is the best way to win a cybersecurity argument? And that's in quotes. You just saw me make air quotes if you're watching the screen. And so I don't want to set this up as if you are competing for the client's business, but you are probably walking into the conversation in a little bit of a different position than the prospect. And so you're a little bit at odds with one another simply because you don't see things the same way. So how do you win the argument, which then allows you to win the business? Obviously, we want to add monthly recurring revenue. So we need to win that argument. And then I want to talk about how to complete an effective discovery. There's a whole lot of training, and it tends to just be discovery is the most important part of the sales process, period, the end. And I don't see a whole lot of training actually unpacking like what is an effective discovery and how do I measure whether or not I did discovery well and effectively? And how do I maybe train my team on what discovery should look like? And so I want to give you very, very tangible tactical ideas around discovery. And then finally, we are going to talk about the piece of sales that nobody likes to talk about. We all wish it didn't happen, which is objection handling. And I'm going to share with you my UTM objection handling framework that you're going to love. You can apply this to any objection that you've ever heard in a sales call. Now, I'm going to move quickly. I have plenty of content, but if I leave questions unanswered, I'm very, very reachable. So connect with me on LinkedIn, also Facebook. If you search for Cybersecurity Sherpa, I'm the only one that comes up. It's shocking. Or you can send me an email directly, jennifer@mspsalesrevolution.com. I love helping MSPs and MSSPs troubleshoot sales calls, talk through sales motion. How do we get more deals into the pipeline? How do we close them faster, easier? And we're going to talk a little bit about that today in just a couple minutes. But let's start with talking about a sales process. Now, Tobias, I'm going to ask you to queue up that first poll question. Do you have a sales process? Because I'm curious what everybody's current situation is. So do you I don't really have one. It's kind of in one person's head. It might be your head or a salesperson's head. Maybe it's really well documented. Maybe you've said, no, it's not at all documented, but we're planning to do it this quarter, especially if you're following Rockefeller Habits or Traction and you've picked your quarterly rocks for Q3, which I hope you have. Maybe this is your quarterly rock and you say, yeah, this is really a high priority. Okay. The poll question was not designed to let me take a sip of water, but that was a good opportunity. Okay, so almost half of you, it's not written down. It's all in one person's head. Okay, so that is something we're going to talk about. And then, good quarter of you. It is written down, very well documented. I love you. That's awesome. That is fantastic. We are in the process of documenting a lot of our internal processes, sales processes, prospecting, social media. Many of you are great at documenting the operations side of the business and not so great at documenting sales and marketing because it feels harder and it's something that doesn't come naturally. So what I want to talk about is why you want a sales process, because every system is getting you exactly the result that it is designed to get. Which means if you are not happy with your close rate, then that is because of your sales process. So if you have a sales process, whether it's written down or in your head or non-existent or on a bunch of Post-it notes, or it's the process where you simply fly by the seat of your pants, that process is getting you the close rate that you're getting, whether that's 20% or 90%, that process is delivering exactly what it's designed to deliver. So when you have a process, you're able to look at the results of that process and say, am I happy with the end result? Am I happy with a 10% close rate? If the answer is no, then what you have to change is the process. But if you don't have anything documented, then where in the world do you start to change? And so if you look at your process and you say, I'm thrilled with this process, we have a 70%, 80%, 90% close rate, and we've got plenty of leads coming in. Maybe I'll hire a salesperson to work my sales process, but it's not written down. You are never going to have a salesperson replicate your system when that system isn't documented. And so that is part of the reason why it is so important to document your sales process. So I've been talking about process for quite a few minutes now, and I've actually have parked on this concept of creating your sales process for about a year or so. And so I was really stumped almost, caught a bit flat-footed when someone raised their hand at a live event and said, what's a sales process? And I went, oh, like I made the cardinal rule of assuming that when I was using this word over and over and over again, that there was just a natural understanding of what that meant. And that isn't the case. And so I want to show you my sales process, not because it's perfect. I mean, I do love it, but simply because I want to whet your appetite for what this could look like. And so mine starts with an opening and, bonding and rapport and a little bit of chit chat and maybe your unique selling proposition. Then we get into discovery, which we're going to unpack in just a couple of minutes. And then it's like, okay, we need to kind of transition into either a presentation or maybe it's a risk assessment. And then finally, we need to go into the ask. And so that's a process. Now, this has quite a few arrows and flow charts and things like that. Yours can be much more simple than this. You can create it. You really can create it on Post-it notes. Now, at some point, you may want to translate it to something more electronic, but that's what a sales process looks like. It's like, first we do this, then we do this, then we ask for a network assessment or a risk assessment, then we go out and we do the risk assessment, then we come back in. How does that work? So I want to ask a question, and Tobias, I think we have this as a poll question. If you get to the end of a sales call and it's a valid sales call and they're qualified and, oh, I gave this to you in the wrong order, that Tobias, that's on me. So pull that down. We'll hold that for just a second. If you get to the end of a sales call and you don't close it, what is the most likely reason that you don't close? Is it because they're not the decision maker? So you've been talking for the last 40 minutes and you're not even talking to the decision maker. Or could it be that they don't have the budget? They love everything you just told them, but they're like, yeah, we have exactly $17 to spend on IT and cybersecurity. You are 2,000. We can't do that. So is it budget? Is it decision maker? Or do they stall and say, oh, we've decided that this isn't going to be the right timing? Well, no matter what the reason is, you can actually reverse engineer your sales process. So I've already spoken a little bit about, go ahead and leave that up. That's awesome. Thank you. I love that you're flexing with my mistake with putting those in the wrong order. Thank you for doing that. I've already hinted at the fact that you are very great operationally, most of you. Some of you are natural salespeople and you're not in the tech world, but most of the people listening are technical by nature. And you think about process and you think about troubleshooting on the ops side of your business. I want you to take that and apply it to the sales side. So if you know that there's a really good chance that you're going to spend all of your time, dare I say, waste all of your time talking to someone who is not a decision maker, then could you build into your process, ideally at the very beginning, so you don't spend a whole lot of time, hey, are you the decision maker? Now, maybe that's not the best way to ask that question, but I'm wondering, could you simply say at the very beginning, hey, how's this decision going to be made? That's a very soft way of finding out, are they the decision maker or not? Because if they say, oh, I'm gathering prices, then I'm going to go back and we're going to pick the cheapest price. Well, now you know Sally's gathering prices, so she's probably not the decision maker. You also probably just uncovered that price is a major factor. Or you can then say, okay, so you're just gathering information. What happens then? Oh, you're not the decision maker. Great, fantastic. Now I know that. Then you can say, okay, so is price the only thing you're looking for, or do you actually care about like the quality of the service and the quality of the protection mechanism? Nope, money is all we care about. Well, if you're the lowest price, then that's great. You're now like slam dunk, it's closed. I'm going to mark this 99% won in my pipeline. But chances are, if you're here and you're about continuing education, you're probably not the cheapest bidder in your area. So if you uncover that this prospect is not willing to spend any more than whatever the lowest price is, then probably it's not a valid prospect. Now, most of you said you get to the end of a sales call and you hear what I call the dreaded objection. It is my personal hated objection. It's the one that I hate the most. And we'll talk about objection handling in a few minutes. But if you know that your system is creating this objection at the end of your sales calls, because remember, this is not personal. This is every system is perfectly designed to give you the result that you're getting. So your system, my system, is causing prospects to get to the end of the sales call and say, that all sounds good, right? Because they always preface it with like something to make you feel better, or that all sounds great, or that sounds perfect. That's exactly what we wanted, like whatever those feel good statements are. I just need to think about it, or we need to think about it, or we're just going to have a conversation. We'll let you know today, tomorrow, next week, next year, probably never, whether or not I want to buy from you. So if you know that your current sales process is perfectly designed to get something in response that you don't want to hear, then why don't we re-engineer that process so that that doesn't happen? And Sandler teaches this concept called upfront contract. And it literally goes something like this. Hey, at the end of this conversation, I'm going to have gotten a ton of information about you. You'll have gotten a lot of information about how we work. And at the end of this conversation, I'm going to ask you a very critical question. I'm going to ask you, does it make sense to move to the next step, which is to do a risk assessment? And what I would like you to do is tell me, based on this conversation, are we moving forward with a risk assessment, or are we not? And if the answer is no, it's fine. But obviously a yes, then we're going to talk about what the next steps are, how we schedule that, and talk through that process. The only thing that I ask is that you not say, I need to think about it. Because I've been in sales for a really long time. And usually when someone says, I need to think about it, it's kind of a polite way to say no. And if you say, I need to think about it, I'm now in this ethical dilemma where I'm like, are they thinking about it? Are they not? I don't think they liked it. Now I've got to follow up. Am I pestering them? Am I bothering them? It just puts it in a really awkward position. So are you comfortable telling me no if the answer is no? And at the beginning of the call, 99% of people will say, I'm comfortable telling you no. Absolutely, I'll tell you no. And then most people will actually keep their word at the end and just say, you know what, I just don't think it's a fit. And then you can say, why is that? And now you're having an open dialogue. Now you will sometimes have people just reflexively say, I need to think about it. Maybe that's just was ingrained in them, from their family or what have you. But it's like it's a gut instinct, right? Like it's like sneezing. They can't help it. Oh, I need to think about it. You can then remind them like, wait. So Richard, do you remember at the very beginning of this conversation, I said, you were going to tell me yes, or you were going to tell me no. And that if you said, I need to think about it, it's probably a no. It sounds like it's a no. Are you just comfortable telling me that? And again, you're now opening up a dialogue. So that's the way having a documented sales process will allow you to troubleshoot. And I'm using that word on purpose because you guys are great at troubleshooting. I want you to apply it to your sales process as well. Okay, so I want to shift a little bit and talk about these two arguments that you need to make when you're walking into a conversation with a prospect. And I'm using the word prospect. Understand that it may mean a client who simply just hasn't adopted your cybersecurity solution yet. They are still a prospective client for your cybersecurity solution. And when you walk in, you are diametrically opposed to them. Because if we were in a room, I would ask you to raise your hand. How many of you think if you walk into a prospect's office and they have not changed their security in 5 years, how many of you think it's really likely that a security incident is imminent? Maybe it's not going to happen today or tomorrow, but you're like, boy, are you on borrowed time. So you know these things intimately, like they're second nature to you. But your clients and prospects are going through life thinking everything's fine. So you're at very different approaches to this conversation. So I want to introduce you to this concept. This is a little bit of a pivot from a concept that I got from the Gap Selling book. So shout out to them. And I want to talk about the likelihood first, the likelihood of a cybersecurity incident happening. So most of you are really high. Like if they do nothing, something is very likely to happen, extremely high. Your clients, your prospects are maybe they're just not paying attention to the same trade publications as you, which is likely because they're not walking a mile in your shoes. Maybe they're not paying attention to their trade publications. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they have competing priorities. And so they're trying to tell themselves that it's very unlikely for something to happen so they can focus on hiring, firing, acquiring, SOPs, like all of the things that are real and pertinent in a business. So whether they truly believe that it's very unlikely for something to happen, or they've just kind of tricked themselves into thinking that, they are still in a very different place on this line than you are. And then the second thing that I want you to think of is impact. So the impact on the organization. Most of you, if I said, okay, your biggest client was just hit with ransomware, highly impactful or not much impact? Most of you are going to say highly impactful. So you're in this upper right quadrant where you know if this thing happens, which it is highly likely to happen if they do nothing, this will be highly impactful on their organization. So you're up and to the right, like the Gartner Magic Quadrant. But your clients are typically in one of the three other areas. And you know this because when you hear objections like, well, maybe it would happen to me, but I have insurance, it wouldn't impact me. They're in that low impact. Even if they're in the high likelihood, they're in the low impact. So they're not real likely to buy from you because you need them to be in that top quadrant. You need them to believe both of these arguments. So that's your goal. And so when you hear some of these objections now over the next couple of months, like it couldn't happen to me, well, that's a low likelihood. Or, well, I know we'd be down for a week or two, but we'd recover. It would be okay. That is low impact. And as business owners, we do not spend money on things that are going to solve non-problems. We don't have extra money to spend because we frivolously want to spend or invest in anything. We need to believe that there's a critical reason to spend the money. So these two arguments have to be made. And what's interesting is if you've ever read anything about marketing, anything about sales, you know that people make decisions emotionally and then they justify them logically. These two arguments, one of these is very emotional, one of them is very logical. The impact on your business, when framed correctly, is very emotional. And I don't mean fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I'm not asking you to play the FUD card, but I am suggesting that the prospects need to believe that if this thing happens to them, it's going to impact their business. And I'll show you how to do that when we get to the discovery section in a minute. But the impact on your business, when you frame this correctly, that impact should cause an emotional reaction. You don't want your prospects to have this flat affect where nothing, it doesn't matter to them. They're very logical. They will just make the decision logically. They will not make the decision logically. The logical decision is, It sounds good. I need to think about it. That is really a key. When you're hearing that, a lot of times it's because you did not prove these two arguments. So remember, you're trying to get your prospects to move up and to the right. So you want them to believe, okay, I thought when Jennifer walked in here, I really thought that it was highly unlikely that a cybersecurity incident could happen to me. I thought I was small. I thought my data didn't matter to them. I thought, doing what I'd always done for the last 5 or 10 or 20 years was enough, because it's always been enough up until now. I thought that because I had never seen anything in the news about a small business owner being hit, I thought I was fine. But Jennifer shared data, asked me questions, helped me realize, helped me discover, that's what discovery is all about, helped me discover that this thing actually could happen to me, and it's highly likely. I had no idea until Jennifer came in and had this sales conversation with me. And guess what? That prospect now sees me as a thought leader. On the other axis, your prospects, you want them to be saying, you know what, walking in to this conversation with Michael, I thought I was impervious, that, okay, maybe this thing will happen. I kind of knew. My mom clicked a link and it scrambled up her pictures. And it was like, oh, we lost the family recipe in my wedding pictures. Not ideal, but not the end of the world. But I had not really applied this to my own business. And now that Michael asked some really pointed questions, I've discovered that this could really be a massive issue. It might end my business, maybe not, but at the very least, it's a whole lot of stress that if I can mitigate, I can reduce the risk of this happening. Yeah, it's definitely worth a deeper conversation. So I hope you see how you're shifting them from whatever quadrant they're in up and to the right, so that they believe this is highly likely to happen. True, right? We're not like proving fake arguments. You're not fear mongering. This is a legitimate thing. It is very likely to happen. And then it is a very high impact event as well. And so when you prove both of these arguments, that's when you can make a sale. Now, you're going to do these during the discovery conversation. And again, as I mentioned early on, there's often a lot of theoretical information about discovery. Like, discovery is the most important part of your sales call. And I used to nod and write down in my notes, because I'm a note taker, I would write discovery is the most important part of the sales call. But I never knew, what is it that I'm discovering, and where is it that I'm trying to lead the prospect, and what kind of questions do I ask the prospect to lead them there, and how can I gauge whether or not I've done a good job with sales? Have I been a good salesperson? And I can say, okay, I followed, like the yellow brick road, and I got them where I wanted to get them. It was very theoretical. It wasn't very concrete. I want to give you concrete, like, what should discovery look like? I'm going to share some specific questions with you, and then I'll help you apply this specifically to cybersecurity. So I call myself the Sherpa. So I talk a lot about climbing the mountain. So just bear with me, because the goal is to climb to the top of the mountain, and you have discovered so much about your client, or actually you've helped your client discover a whole lot of things about themselves, and you've just done it naturally and very conversationally, and not in a pushy or sleazy or slimy sort of way either. So where I want you to start is by talking about the company, and more importantly, asking about the company. And so I'm going to phrase this as if you are only selling cybersecurity. I know most of the time you're selling a bundle, but for purposes of this particular training, you would say, how would it impact your company if you were down for a week and a half? How would it impact and you would wait for an answer, of course. How would it impact your company if you could not access your accounting files, or you couldn't pay your bills or process payroll? How would that impact your company? And so you're starting at a very basic level. That's not super intrusive. By the way, when you're doing bonding and rapport at the beginning, you can follow these same steps, which you'll see in a minute. But for purposes of discovery, you are asking questions about the company. Very easy, very basic. Then you're going to go to another level. This is a little bit more difficult, but not particularly difficult. And you're going to say, okay, well, what about your department? You mentioned you are in charge of marketing and sales. You're in charge of business development. So I'm curious, at any one time, how much is in your pipeline, and how would it feel if you were down and you couldn't access your pipeline, you couldn't send out a proposal, you couldn't create quotes, all the things that business development people do, you couldn't make your phone calls, you couldn't follow up on leads, your lead scoring system might be scoring people, but you can't access it because you don't have access to those tools. How would that impact your department? So do you see how that hits a little bit deeper, hits at a little bit of a different level than how is this going to impact the company? Like, we care, the most employees care about the company, but they really care about their paycheck. And so we're going from the broad, how is this going to impact the company, to like, okay, how about your team? Like your department, the people you care about, your bread and butter that you individually are in charge of. Then we go from team to role. So again, we've started broad. And so now we're talking about the role. Okay, so you're the VP of sales and marketing. You're the VP of business development. You just said it was going to be pretty impactful, and repeat back to them some things that they said, good active listening skills and things like that. So you said it was really going to be devastating because you couldn't access your pipeline, you couldn't close your sales. So I'm just curious, what's your quota? Like, what's your weekly or your daily or your monthly quota? And is it fair to assume that if you were down for 2 weeks with a ransomware attack, that you're not going to hit your quota? What does that do to you personally? Do you miss a bonus? Do you get a written warning? Probably you don't lose your job, right? Okay, so now this thing, this scary thing that we're wanting to talk about, that was previously very intangible, is starting to become extremely tangible. So we've gone from company to department to role, and then where the magic happens, and you can't always do this, but sometimes you can apply it to them personally. And when you can apply the challenges and the pain to them personally, you really have just won this individual over. And here's what I mean by that. If you're able to say, okay, so you didn't make quota, so do you miss a bonus? Oh, okay, so I'm not going to ask you how much that bonus was, but what were you planning to do with the bonus? Oh, you were going to take your family to Hawaii. Okay, so now what? Can we just push it forward 3 to 6 months? Oh, you wanted to go when the weather was perfect. Oh, you wanted to plan around your brother's wedding. Oh, it was like this month or never. So I guess it's never if this horrible thing happens. Or if you're talking to the CEO, again, you'll go from company to department, may not exactly apply for the CEO, but you can say, executive team, and then their role. And then typically with most of your clients, under about 100 employees or so, the CEO still has a very hands-on nature with the clients. Like, he or she still knows the clients, still has a great relationship with the clients. And so when you're saying, okay, who's going to call your clients to say, hey, we're going to be down in the water for a week or two. We've got a plan to get back up. We're working with someone to get us back up and running. But Mr. CEO, you have to make all of those phone calls. How is that going to impact you personally? Like, you're probably going to be pulling some 18 or 20-hour days, and we didn't even talk about, press and the attorneys and insurance and like just the chaos, holding the team together and being that leader that I know you are. So how is that going to go over at home when you've got a week or two that you're like sleeping at your desk? How's that going to impact you? So we've gone from this, I don't know, maybe it would happen to me, but we just bounce back. I don't know, we're like Gumby. We're just super resilient. And now you're like, well, how would it impact the company? How about your department? How about your role? How about you personally? And all of a sudden it's harder to shake it off when you're like, oh, like, this is real. This is like legit a challenge. So I want you to think about that as it comes to your discovery. And I want to leave you with one other thought. And I hinted at this earlier. As I was learning more about sales and a little frustrated about the lack of information about discovery, what I finally realized is that discovery is not for me, the salesperson. Like, I'm probably not going to discover a whole lot of new information from a sales call that I have tomorrow. You probably are not going to walk into a prospect and learn much new at all, because you already know that probably backups aren't running on at least one machine. You probably know that there's a high likelihood that there's some mysterious server in the server closet that nobody knows what it does. Nobody knows where it came from. Like, it just appeared magically one day and we don't really know what it does. I mean, you could threaten to unplug it, but they would probably freak out because, like, we don't know what it does, but it's probably important. Like, you know that there's some shadow IT going on. You know that people are using Post-it notes and putting their passwords on them and tucking them under their laptop and, like, wink, wink, cross our fingers. Nobody knows that's where the passwords are, right? So, like, you are not going to discover anything new. And that's one thing I would love to shift, is that discovery is for the prospect. Your job in discovery is to help the prospect to discover the impact, the implications of all of these things that you already know. So you have to help them discover how doing nothing is a horrible idea. You have to help them discover all of these things that you know intuitively, but your prospect is blind to walking in the door. So discovery is to help the prospect see what you know. And so your job is to take the blinders off for your prospect. And so if you look at discovery that way, I think that will shift the way that you walk through your sales calls. Now, I want to talk about one final concept inside of sales, inside of cybersecurity sales, which is objection handling. Now, I have heard many, many, many trainers talk about overcoming objections. And so I am trying to retrain my brain not to say overcoming objections, but rather to say diffusing objections. And that is not just semantics. Language is extremely powerful. And so when you use words like overcoming, I overcome an objection, there is a natural hierarchy where you are trying to beat something or you are trying to be the victor. And it almost conjures to my mind like a dragon, and the dragon is dead and you're standing on the dragon's neck and, you know, like, I have vanquished the dragon. So I don't like this idea of overcoming an objection, because it sets up this relationship that, like, I am the hero, I have beaten my opponent. And most of you don't look at your clients that way. Most of you want a lifelong relationship with your clients. You want to be a trusted advisor. You want to be seen as a partner. And so if you're starting your sales conversation with a thought around overcoming and beating and vanquishing, that is diametrically opposed to partnership and thought leadership and being a helper, being helpful. So I want to encourage you to use the word diffusing an objection. And if you've ever watched any movies with a bomb, and they always have a timer on it. I don't know if that's true in real life. I kind of suspect that's probably not true in real life. But in a movie, they always have a timer on it. It is almost always hidden in a back corner of like a parking garage or something, so that it can inflict massive damage if it goes off. And there is this tension, this natural, like they zoom in on the timer and you're like, oh, are they going to get, they almost always, there's, I'm sure, a handful of movies that they don't defuse the bomb in time. But that's what I want you to think of, is more that this is a situation where there's tension and there's uncertainty, which, by the way, is why you're uncomfortable. And your job is to diffuse it. It almost like you're trying to find the right wire to snip, that all of a sudden the timer stops and you're like, we're good. There's no more tension in the room. So think about that. That's the feeling you're going for when you're diffusing these objections. So let's bring that down out of theory into practical. So this is my UTM method for overcoming objections. So the first thing I want you to do is to understand. One of my sales trainers always said, seek to understand. Alex Rogers says this a lot, seek to understand. And so you must understand where this objection is coming from. So if the prospect says, you know what, that's an awful lot of money, we just can't afford that. Understand where they're coming from. Seek to understand. Are they saying we don't have the money? Like it doesn't matter if we want it or not. We cannot write a check for that every month. Are they saying that's a lot of money in comparison to another agreement that they're looking at? Are they saying, wow, that's a lot of money in comparison to what we've spent before? Is this person saying that's a lot of money because we have the money and I don't really care about the other proposals, but I am only authorized to spend $2,300 a month and you're $2,500 a month. So that's a lot of money in relation to what I am authorized to spend. So you must understand where they're coming from. So that's what the U is for. Because if you immediately jump to, oh, I understand it's a lot of money, but let me explain why. And we're better, and there's cheaper guys, and all of that may be true. But if you don't understand where the prospect is coming from, you take a chance on overcoming the wrong objection, diffusing the wrong objection. So I ran into this in a very real situation earlier this week, maybe late last week. The days blur together, and we were near the end of the conversation. I was talking to an MSP, and I gave the investment, and the MSP said, "Wow." Now, I've been in sales long enough that I'm like, okay, don't talk, don't talk, don't talk. And it's not like, oh, he who talks first loses. It's more like give this individual a chance to breathe, give this individual a chance to take space and to share what's going on. And so he said, wow. And I just waited, and he said, how much was that investment again? And I repeated it. And he looked a little shell-shocked, and his eyes got a little wide. And I'm like, seek to understand, seek to understand, seek to understand, because I have to coach myself too. And he said, I really thought it'd be about twice that much. Okay, so glad I didn't try to justify, well, it's worth every penny and rah, rah, rah. He already was sold. And so maybe that's not an objection necessarily, but that is a principle that we all need to take into our sales calls, that we can't assume that we know what the other person is thinking. So seek to understand. The T in the UTM method is tactics. What is a tactic that you could use to diffuse this objection? Now, you can't necessarily think of this in the moment, because in the moment, you're kind of like, I got an objection. Oh no, what am I going to do? But if your sales system allows you to review at the end of your sales call, and you find out there was an objection that you didn't handle well, you can ask yourself, how could I have understood this person? Did I understand where they were coming from, or did I just assume that I knew? So what am I going to do next time? Okay, what are some tactics that I could have used? What's that script? What's that conversation sound like? What's that talk track? How could I walk through this with the person? And then the M for UTM is less about what is happening in that moment, and it is more, what could you have done in your marketing? What could you have sent ahead of your sales call that perhaps would have made this objection completely evaporate? So as an example, if you suspect that some of your prospects think, oh, it could never happen to me, I could never be hit with a ransomware attack, could you start to create some collateral around statistics or stories or case studies of small businesses just like them in your city, in your state, in your town that have been hit with something? And if you're using that in your marketing, there's also a chance they didn't see that, your prospect didn't see that marketing. So maybe you send a little marketing packet ahead of time in like a pre-sales call packet. And now you may be able to overcome or diffuse some of these objections before they even come up, leveraging your marketing and bundling that up in such a way that you can send it ahead of your sales call. So I hope you got some tactical, tangible suggestions. We're going to open it up for questions in just a minute. I did mention like I'm all about marketing and sales. And so I have a complete system that I teach to MSPs. It's part of my MSP transformation machine. And sales is step number 7. We go into sales very, very deeply. And so if you're curious what that looks like, go ahead and scan that QR code. Happy to have a conversation with you. See if it makes sense to work together. But beyond that, I hope that this particular training session was impactful and that you got some tangible takeaways that you can apply in your next sales call. So I'm going to shift to Q&A. Michael, I buried my Q&A, so I'm going to let you do questions if that's okay.
Well, you buried it under a lot of great stuff.
Awesome.
A lot of great comments and chats coming in. Folks, please be sure to use the Q&A area if you've got something to share or ask about. We did see a number of questions, people asking about a recording, and the answer to that one is yes. I'll be on the lookout for that tomorrow. All right, Jennifer. So we got a question here. So what are some of the mistakes that people make during discovery in this process?
Oh, I like that because we talked a lot about the good things to do in discovery. So one of the biggest, I hinted at assuming, we talked about that specifically in objection handling. Don't assume that you understand, but there's a lot of assuming in the discovery process. And what I want to encourage you is, again, just like we talked about in objection handling, is to really dig in and ask those open-ended questions. What do you mean by that? How so? Help me understand. And then another mistake that I see, in addition to assuming, is simply talking too much in discovery, because a lot of us were trained that discovery is like me talking a whole lot. When in reality, discovery should be me asking questions and the prospect listening. And so statistically, I believe it's 81 or 84% of prospects want to be listened to in the sales process, in the sales calls. It's 80+%. I'm not sure about the other 20%. I don't understand why anyone would be in that minority, but 80+% want to be listened to. But only 20-something% of salespeople actually listen in the sales process. So discovery is not, let's pepper them with questions and just, I don't really know what they answered, but I don't know, just put a checkbox there because they answer question number 17. No, like it's not, the questions aren't magical. You're not going to ask the right sequence of questions and I don't have to pay attention to the answers because simply asking the questions is enough. No, you've got to listen to the answers and dig in and truly understand where the person's coming from.
Yeah, and so you've definitely got some disciples or friends here. Even before you got to answer the question, Matt said basically not listening is a mistake, and then Stan said you can talk yourself out of a sale when you oversell.
Yes, 100%. Totally agree. Love it.
And then so also a couple of comments too, also to turn into a question. Stan was also talking about sometimes you need to navigate through more than one person to get to the decision maker. So maybe I'll kind of, Stan, if I may pivot on that. Jennifer, how about how do you get to the decision maker more quickly, or how do you sort of earn your way through each of those doors?
Yeah. So first of all, I love the question. There should be like a pre-qualification call, easy for me to say, before you even get to the sale, to make sure that you're not talking to a gatekeeper. So you kind of led with that, but then creative ways to get around the gatekeeper or to really get through the gatekeeper is to form just a little bit of a relationship with that gatekeeper. Perhaps you ask about their weekend, you ask about their call volume, how's today going? Like really, don't just say, yeah, fine. But like, how's your Monday? Like, is it a crazy Monday or is it a good Monday? How was your weekend? And you would be amazed how simply forming just a little bit of a relationship with that gatekeeper goes a long way. Because most people, they go, oh, you're the gatekeeper. Okay, can you leave a message for Bob? Thanks, goodbye. And they hang up. So it's it is positioning you as a difference maker, and it's a bit of a pattern interrupt when you're like, no, I care about you. Like, yes, I want to talk to Richard, but like, I care about you, and I know that I have to get through you to get to Richard. Another technique is to ask for their help. As humans, we like to play the rescuer. We like to help people. And so if you can say, hey, Renee, I could really use your help. I talked to Richard at a trade show. Don't lie, that's another conversation. But I talked to Richard at a trade show. He gave me his business card. He wrote on the back, make sure Renee knows that I talked to you, that I wanted to talk to you. But I don't know how to get to him. And you're doing a great job. And I know you're paid to be his gatekeeper, and like mad props because I can't get through you. But like, he really does want to take my call. Where do we go from here? And if you're just like really honest, like I just need to talk to him and he wants my call, or he has no idea I'm calling, but this is a big deal and he's going to want to take my call. How do I get 3 minutes with him? What's the best day, the best time for me to get 3 minutes with him just on the phone? Going, I'm not okay, or can I get your help, is very effective.
Good, I like that. Excellent. Bill's got coming from another angle here. Wondering if there's any insights on differentiating between basically his offerings and a competitor's offerings, which may just look the same to a prospect.
Yeah, I love this. I think as salespeople, we all have kind of a deal that got away that eats at us. And man, this must have been 10 years ago. I presented my MSP offering and we had great rapport and I asked great questions. And like, it was like the perfect sales call. And I lost the deal. I was less expensive, which I'm like, what? Like, okay, salesperson fail if I couldn't close the deal when I was less expensive. And I called the prospect and we had enough rapport that I said, why did I lose the deal? And she said, well, this other company had this like backup disaster recovery unit. And we just thought that was really important. And I'm like, we had a BDR. We have a BDR. Don't you remember I talked to you about how would it feel if that? And she's like, well, yeah, but theirs was called a BDR. And I'm like, well, ours is called a BDR too. I just didn't want to. I'm like, I'm whining now for camera. Like, I hope I didn't actually whine that much, but I don't know. I might have. And I hate that because I should have won that deal. My offer was at least as compelling as the other person, and I was less expensive, and I still lost the deal. So I share that because number one, you can't win every opportunity that you're presented with. However, if you are looking at your offer and it is largely the same as the other offers, then any one of your prospects is going to buy based on price. Because if Michael is selling you a red apple and Jennifer is selling you a red apple and mine is 50 cents and Michael's is $5, almost every single one of us, except for Michael, would buy the one that's 50% or 50 cents. Because as business owners, that's how we make decisions. What's the one that makes the most sense? So how do you differentiate? Is by digging in during discovery, finding out what is important to them, and you sell to that. Now, understand, I'm not saying change your offering. I'm not saying create a whole new package for this person, but you're going to stress the pieces of the puzzle that this prospect cares about. So, silly analogy, but let's say that you're selling a car, and I'm like, I've been driving a minivan for years, and I want something that's fun, and I'd really like a sunroof. Please don't talk to me about the radio. I didn't mention whether or not that was important to me. I want it to be fun, probably want it to be red, and I want a sunroof. So those are the features, if you will, that I care about. And so you need to talk to those features, talk about the benefits to having those features. And even if you're selling exactly the same car, but you stress how easy it is to open the sunroof or how throaty the engine sounds, I'm going to buy from you because I'm going to feel heard.
Excellent. All right, Tom is writing in, do you feel you should go into the meeting thinking as a salesperson or as an educator and let the sales fall into place?
Oh, never let the sales fall into place. I've never had a prospect chase me out to the parking lot with their check. So no, I want you thinking like a salesperson. The challenge is some education has to take place, because we talked about moving your prospects up and to the right. And the only way that that can happen is to ask really great questions and to help open their eyes to some things that are the realities that they're up against. So there is a piece of education, but you don't want to educate so much that they feel like, oh, I can execute on that on my own. And I hear this a lot when it's technical people leading sales. And somebody says, this is not cybersecurity specific, but a prospect says, I'm really frustrated because my second screen won't work. I don't know. It's the only thing I can come up with in the moment. And that salesperson takes off the sales hat, puts on the tech hat, and is like, oh, well, let me fix it. There you go. And you just removed all of the, maybe not all of the reason, but a lot of the reason that they would want to do business with you in the first place, which is to remove the pain. When you educate too much, you remove the pain, and they start to feel like, oh, I just need to do patches and educate my team. That doesn't sound so bad. I'll just do that myself. Why should I pay you $4,000 a month? I can do patches on a Saturday. And I'm sure I can like Google something and educate my team. Why is that worth $4,000? So it's a fine line, but never just allow sales to happen. There needs to be strategy in pushing the sales forward.
Great tips, great tips. Jennifer, do you mind moving back to your slide where you had your contact info and your QR code as we wrap up, so people get a chance to
right there.
Info?
Yep, absolutely.
And is that the best way to get in touch with you right there on that screen?
Yeah, that's probably the best way. I mean, email is great as well. Jennifer@mspsalesrevolution.com. Either way totally works.
Awesome. All right. So it looks like we're done with the Q&A, and we're going to speak a little bit about our friends at InfoSec at the end. But how would you wrap things up for us today, Jennifer? What are the final things you want people to leave here with to help boost their sales?
Yeah. So if I could impart anything into your thought process, into your mindset, I actually believe everybody can sell. We are all natural salespeople as 4-year-old kids. Mom, can I have the Twizzler? Can I have the Twizzler? No, I promise I'll eat my dinner. Can I have the Twizzler? And so we are naturally skilled at getting our way, and maybe a little bit of manipulation as a 4 or 5-year-old. I'm not suggesting you should do that as a salesperson. Don't manipulate, but you are capable of being a great salesperson. You may not have a 90% close rate, but 50, 60, 70% close rate is within the realm of possibility for 90% of people on this call, probably everybody on this call. I just don't know everybody. So I'm giving myself a little bit of wiggle room. So if you aren't a great salesperson today, these are learnable skills. There's talk tracks that are learnable. You should probably find a great book or a coach to work with, but you need to become a great salesperson, because sales is the fuel that grows your business.
Yeah, excellent. Great way to wrap things up. And well, awesome insights, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody, have a wonderful day. And please take these lessons to heart today. And we hope to hear from you and your successes soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.